Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Well, we're going to step into the realm of cryptids in the news, part 4. Before we do this, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version, is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. The links to those books are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Mark Twain in The Wild Man, Buffalo, New York, September 18th. 1869. American writer Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, who is well known to us, has written a sketch on the wild man, so often mentioned in news reports both here and abroad. Here's what Twain has imparted to us. The wild man interviewed. There has been so much talk about the mysterious wild man out there in the West for some time that I finally felt it was my duty to go out there and interview him. There was something particular and touchingly romantic about the creature and his strange actions, according to the newspaper reports. He was represented as being hairy, long-armed, and of great strength and stature, ugly and cumbrous, avoiding men, but appearing suddenly and unexpectedly to women and children, going armed with a club, but never molesting any creature, except sheep, or other prey, fond of eating and drinking, and not particular about the quality or quantity or character of the beverages and edibles. Living in the woods like a wild beast, but never angry, moaning and sometimes howling, but never uttering articulate sounds, such as Old Shep, as the papers painted him. I felt that the story of his life must be a sad one, of suffering, disappointment, and exile, a story of man's inhumanity to man in some shape or other. And I longed to persuade the secret from him. "Since you say you are a member of the press," said the wild man, "I am willing to tell you all you wish to know. By and by you will comprehend why it is that I wish to embosom myself, too." A newspaper man, when I so studiously avoided conversation with other people, I will now unfold my strange story. I was born with the world we live upon. Almost. I am the son of Cain. What? I was present when the flood was announced. Which? I am the father of the wandering Jew. Sir, I moved out of range of his club and went on taking notes, but keeping a wary eye on him. All the while he smiled a melancholy smile and resumed. When I glance back over the dreary waste of ages, I see many a glimmering and mark that is familiar to my memory. And oh, the leagues I have traveled, the things I have seen, the events I have helped to emphasize. I was at the assassination of Caesar. I marched upon Mecca with Muhammad, was in the Crusades, and stood with Godfrey when he planted the banner of the cross on the battlements of Jerusalem. One moment, please. Have you given these items to any other journal? Can I... Silence! I was in the Pinta shrouds with Columbus when America burst upon his vision. I saw Charles, I beheaded. I was in London when the gunpowder plot was discovered. I was present at the trial of Warren Hastings. I was on American soil when the Battle of Lexington was fought. When Thai Declaration was promulgated, when Cornwallis surrendered. When Washington died, I entered Paris with Napoleon after Elba. I was present when you mounted your guns and manned your fleets for the War of 1812, when the South fired upon Sumter, when Richmond fell, when the president's life was taken. In all the ages, I have helped to celebrate the triumphs of genius, the achievement of arms, the havoc of the storm, fire, pestilence, famine. Your career has been a stirring one. Might I ask how you came to locate in these dull Kansas woods, when you have been so accustomed to excitement during what I might term so protracted a period, not to put too fine of a point? Listen, once I was honored servant to a noble and illustrious. Here he heaved a sigh and passed his hair hand across his eyes. But in these degenerate days, I am become a slave of quack doctors and newspapers. I am driven from pillar to post and hurried up and down, sometimes with stencil plate and paste brash to defile the fences with Kabbalistic legends, and sometimes in grotesque and extra-vigilant character at the behest of some driving journal. I attended to the Ocean Bank robbery some weeks ago when I was heartily rested from finishing up the powwow about the completion of the Pacific Railroad. Immediately I was spirited off to do another murder for the benefit of the New York papers, next to attend the wedding of a patriarch millionaire, next to raise a hurrah about the great boat race, and then just when I had begun to hope that my old bones would have rest, I bounded off to this howling wilderness to strip and gibber and be ugly and hairy, and pull down fences and waylay sheep and waltz around with a club and play wild man generally, and all in all to gratify the whim of the bedlam of the crazy newspaper scribers. From one end of the continent to the other, I am described as a gorilla with a sort of human seemingly about me, and all to gratify this quill-driving scum from the earth. Poor old carpetbagger. I have served infamously, often in modern and semi-modern times. I have been compelled by base men to create fundamental history and to perpetuate all forms of humbugs. I wrote those crazy genus letters. I moped in the French dungeon for 15 years. I wore a ridiculous iron mask. I poked around your northern forests, among your vagabond Indians, a solemn French idiot, personating a ghost of the dead, that the gaping world might wonder if we had a bourbon among us. I played sea serpent and a woolly horse, and what is it? For the museum, I have interviewed politicians for the Sun, worked up all manner of miracles for the Herald, ciphered up election returns for the World, and thundered political economy through the Tribune. I have done all extravagant things that the wildest invention could contrive, and done them well, and this is my reward, playing wild man in Kansas without a shirt. Mysterious being, a light dawns vaguely upon me, it grows apace. What? What is your name? Sensation, hence horrible shape. I spoke again. O pitiless fate, my destiny hounds me once more. I am called. I go, alas! Is there no rest for me? In the moment, the wild man's features seem to soften and refine, and his form to assume a more human grace. His club changed to a spade, and be-shouldered it, and started away, sighing profoundly and shedding tears. with her poor spade, to dig up the Byron family. Such was a response that floated back upon the wind as the sad spirit shook off the ringlets to the breeze, flourished its shovel aloft, and disappeared beyond the brow of the hill. All of which is in strict accordance with the facts. M.T. This was published in the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette in Kansas, June 24th, 1919, originally published in the Buffalo Express, September 18th, 1869, taken from Mark Twain's 1860s, The Curious Republic of Gundor, born in Liveright. I find that very humorous that one of the greatest writers in history was fascinated with the Sasquatch, or cryptids in general, that he actually created this wild man's persona and did a very interesting job. Doing these news articles, it amazes me, and I say it every time, about the writing and how things were accepted and how odd the words were used back then. Very interesting, and I love it. I really do love this, and I really enjoy that you guys like it too. So anyway, moving on. Sorry. A wild man in South Dakota, Big Sioux, Dakota, December 11th, 1869. We are indebted to Mr. Thompson, who resides on the Dakota side of the Big Sioux, about 15 miles northwest of the city, for particulars of the facts which we are about to narrate. 1 month since, a farmer named Evans, who resides a few miles north of Mr. Thompson, was engaged in hauling firewood from the timber of the Big Sioux, when he was startled by seeing what at first glance appeared to be a wild animal, bound up from a hollow log, but a few yards from where he was standing. A close observation of the object, while it was decamping, satisfied Mr. Evans that it was a wild man. He immediately made pursuit, but it rapidly with which the wild man ran, aided by the thickness of the woods. Him out of either sight or reach, Mr. Evans shortly afterward returned home and informed his neighbors of his adventure and what he had seen. A small party of roll-mounted men started the next day on a trail of the wild man. The party first ransacked the woods in the neighborhood, in a secluded spot, entirely obscure from ordinary observation by the thickness of the underbrush. They discovered a fissure between two rocks. This fissure penetrated into the rocks about 8 feet. On the top was a large lot of underbrush, limbs of trees, and several pieces of portions of hides of animals. There was no indication that there had been a fire kindled anywhere near the place, but from the pieces of rags, long grass, and other matter found on the ground, they were satisfied that it was habitation of the wild man. Not being able to see anything of the object of their search, they went to their homes. A few days afterward, another party of horsemen started out on the same mission of their predecessors, and with more satisfactory results. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, while following up a ravine a few miles from the place where the strange being was first discovered, the party was attracted by a barking of one of their dogs. Immediately afterward, the wild man crossed an open space, closely followed by the 2 dogs. The men put spurs to their horses, and for a short distance gained rapidly on the object of their search. But coming to a deep ravine or gully, skirted on either side by underbrush, their progress was impeded, and during the delay caused by getting out of their situation, the man escaped. Since that time, he has not been seen. We understand that a party of gentlemen from the city purpose starting out in a few days for the purpose of catching this wild man, or rather, nondescript, dead or alive. We hope that no effort will be spared to take him alive and uninjured. From a conversation with Mr. Thompson, we learned that this singular being is entirely covered with seemingly heavy coat of dark-colored hair, that he is agile as a cat and as fleet as a deer. Old settlers in the region where the wild man has been seen state that about 27 years since a Frenchman, with his wife and 3 children, settled upon a piece of land on the banks of the Big Sioux. At that time, the only occupants of the section consisted of the Native Americans, who were the sole owners of the Dakotas, some half-breeds and some few French settlers, most of whom took squaws for their wives. It is related that the Frenchman we have alluded and did not live agreeably with his family, that his affections were lavished upon a dusky daughter of an Indian chief. The white wife, learning of this, appraised her husband for the symptoms of his waning affections, and that one morning a friendly Indian visiting the home of the Frenchman discovered the dead bodies of the wife and children lying on the floor. An investigation discovered the fact that the throat of the woman had been cut from ear to ear, and that the children had been clubbed to death by blows on the head with a stock of a gun or a similar weapon. No clue to the murderer was ever discovered. The Frenchman has never been seen in the country since. The suspicion now is that he committed a triple murder, that reflected on the horror of his crimes and became insane, took to the woods and resides there since, and that the wild man that has lately been seen and the French settler of 27 years since is one and the same person. It is well known that many years since the majority of the Indians who resided in the Big Sioux Valley were, on account of the scarcity of game, compelled to go further west, and, as it is, only within the few last years of this section of country alluded to has been become settled. It was very possible for a man to live there without being discovered, or any person knowing his whereabouts. The whole affair is wrapped up in such a singular mystery that we refrain from comment or surmise until we can speak intelligently on the subject. This originally comes to us from the Sioux City Times, South Dakota, December 1st, 1869. Mysterious creature seen playing with fire. Stanislaus County, California, fall of 1869. A hunter reported an unusual incident in the local mountains involving a hair-covered man-like creature who amused himself with a campfire. He was later joined by another of his species as he left the campsite. The remarkable account is proved here in the hunter's own words. I was hunting in the mountains about 20 miles south of here and camped 5 or 6 days in one place, as I have done every season for the past 15 years. Several times I returned to camp after a hunt and saw that the ashes and charred sticks from the fireplace had been scattered about. An old hunter notices such things, and very soon gets curious to know the cause. Although my bedding and traps and little stores were not disturbed, as I could see, I was anxious to learn who or what it was that was so regularly visiting my camp, for clearly the half-burnt sticks and cinders could not scatter themselves about. I saw no tracks near my camp, as the hard ground covered with leaves would show none, so I started in a circle around the place, and 300 yards off in damp sand I struck a track of a man's feet, as I supposed bare and of immense size. Now I was curious, sure, and I resolved to lie for a barefooted visitor. I accordingly took a position on the hillside about 60 or 70 feet from the fire, and I securely hid in the brush. I waited and watched. 2 hours and more. I sat there and wondered if the owner of the feet would come again, and whether he imagined what an interest he had created in my inquiring mind, and finally what possessed him to be prowling about there with no shoes on. The fireplace was on my right, and the spot where I saw the track was on my left, hid by the bushes. It was in this direction my attention was mostly directed, thinking the visitor would appear there, and besides, it was easier to sit and face that way. Suddenly I was surprised by a shrill whistle, such as boys produce from 2 fingers under their tongue, and turning quickly, I saw, good God, as I saw the object of my solace, standing beside my fire, erect and looking suspiciously around. It was in the image of a man, but it could not have been a human. I was never so benumbed with astonishment before. The creature, whatever it was, stood fully 5 feet high and disproportionate, broad and square in the foreshoulders, with arms of great length. The legs were very short and the body long. The head was small compared to the rest of the creature, and appeared to be set upon his shoulders with no neck. The whole was covered with dark brown and cinnamon-colored hair, quite long in some spots. That on the head, standing in a shock and growing close down to the eyes, like a Digger Indian's. As I looked, he threw his head back and whistled again, and then stopped and grabbed a stick from the fire. This he swung around until the fire on the end had gone out. When he repeated the maneuver, I was dumb, almost, and couldn't only look. 15 minutes I sat and watched him as he whistled and scattered my fire about. I could easily have put a bullet through his head, but why should I kill him? Having amused himself, apparently, as he desired, with my fire, he started to go, and, having gone a short distance, he returned, and was joined by another, a female, unmistakably, when both turned and walked past me, within 20 yards of where I had sat, and disappeared into the brush. I could not have had a better opportunity for observing them, as they were unconscious of my presence. Their only object in visiting my camp seemed to be to amuse themselves with swinging lighted sticks around. I have shared this story many times since, and it has often raised an incredulous smile, but I have met one person who has seen the mysterious creature, and a dozen of whom have come across the tracks of various places between here and Pachaco Pass. Fast forward. The hunter actually provided this report to a newspaper in November of 1870. He was remarking on reported accounts of previous sightings of similar creatures. He prefaced his report with the following: I saw in your paper a short time since an item concerning the gorilla which was said to have been seen in Crow Canyon and shortly after in the mountains. You sneered at the idea of there being such a critter in these hills, and were I not better informed, I should sneer too, or else conclude that one of your recent prospecting party had gotten lost in the wilderness and did not have sense enough to find his way back to Terry's. I positively assure you that this gorilla or wild man, or however you want to call it, is no myth. I know that it exists, and that there are at least 2 of them, having seen them both at once not a year ago. Their existence has been reported many times in the past 20 years, and I have heard it said in the early days an orangutan escaped from a ship on the southern coast. But the creature, I had seen was not an animal, and if it was, where did it get its mate? Import her as a webbed foot? Did their wives? This came to us from the Ontelope Ledger, California, 1869, October 16th. Strange animal suspect in disappearance of brothers, Mount St. Helen, 1860s. A shroud of mystery surrounds the disappearance of two Burgoyne brothers who, along with their third brother, established Copper, Maine, near Grizzly Lake. About 2 years ago, the three put forth a great deal of effort in building a sturdy cabin at the site so that one of them could winter there to protect their claim. When the other two returned in the spring, they found that the cabin had been broken into, and that it was evident that a tragic struggle had taken place, but there was no sign of the lone brother. He had kept a diary, and they saw he had recorded sightings of a strange hairy animal in the area. I don't know what kind of animals they are, he wrote, although he was reputed to have seen bear, elk, deer, and other wild animals. The two remaining brothers carried on with their claim, and again one stayed for the winter. When the third brother returned, the same thing was seen, and again no sign of the brother who had remained. The last brother left the area, never to return. Fast forward, there is still evidence that a Burgoyne, or a Burgoynes, did actually have a claim in the area. What is left of the mine is called the Burgoyne Mine. A lake is called Burgoyne Snow Lake, and a few logs are left, 1963, of what is believed to have been the cabin. This was taken from Amazing Things Found in a Hunt for the Truth about Mount St. Helens Apes, the Journal Washington, USA, August 1963. Giant hairy wild man captured, Saline County, Arkansas, 1860s. A 7-foot-tall hairy wild man who has been seen many times in the mountains has been captured. Although he has not harmed anyone, he was greatly feared, so a party was organized to capture him. A daring young man led the group with a pack of deerhounds. The wild man was tracked to a cave and lassoed with a rope. When the lariat noose fell over his shoulders, he emitted a strange sound like that of a trapped animal. He was taken to Benton and lodged in jail, a small building made of logs. He immediately tore from his body the clothing provided by his capture. He is said to be of a white race but covered with long, thick hair. The creature escaped from the flimsy jail, but was recaptured, this time in canebrakes. Just how long it remained in custody, or what became of it, is not known. This comes to us from 1941, Ozark County, Dual, Sloan, and Pierce. A wild man in the mountains, northwestern Nevada, August 1st, 1870. Northwestern Nevada has its sensation just now over a lost of a wild man who has been discovered in the mountains of the country. A party went in search of him recently and succeeded in getting sight of him and finding his habitation, but not in capturing him. He is described as being undoubtedly a white man, about 40 years of age, nearly covered by a coat of fine long hair, and not at all startling in appearance. And from the sets of soldier buttons found in his cave, is supposed to be a man lost from Fairmont's command about 1846. The searching party had just picketed their horses for the night when he made an appearance, and with a roar attacked the horses in a perfect frenzy of madness, driving them down the mountain and ending the pursuit only after a 5-mile chase. when one of the horses had been disabled by a fall down a cliff and was mangled by him in a fearful manner. This comes to us from the Titusville Morning Herald, Pennsylvania, August 1st, 1871. Alright guys, there's part 4. I hope you guys enjoy it. I know you guys do because I've read the comments and I'm really liking it. I was especially fond tonight of the Mark Twain one. Just because I am an avid reader, I've always loved to read, and so English was like my favorite class growing up, and Mark Twain, you always learn about Mark Twain when you're in school, and I just loved reading his stuff when I was young growing up, and always envisioning Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn and yada yada yada. But very interesting was the mock newspaper reporting done, and it's crazy. It was just a cryptid. Just think about it now. A guy who Stephen King, and in Maine there's a Dogman running around killing people or terrorizing people, and King decides to write this rather humorous account of him interviewing the Dogman. That's what it'd be like, and it's just awesome. It really is awesome. Accepting, but not really, back then. So I don't know. Anyway, with that, I'm gonna bid you farewell. This is a bonus episode from earlier today, so I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks so much.